Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jill Weimer, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's State of the School address with Dean Mark Taubman. Just to introduce myself, I received my PhD from the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry in 2006, my master's in 2004, and my undergraduate degree over on River Campus in 1997. Currently, I serve in a unique dual pharma and academic research role, serving as a senior leader at Stanford Research, where my academic lab is in South Dakota, as well as serving as the Chief Science Officer of Amicus Therapeutics in Philadelphia, where I spend a majority of my time. I also serve as the newly elected president of the School of Medicine and Dentistry Alumni Council, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you would like to view this session in closed caption, click on the CC toolbar and select turn on your subtitles. If you have questions, there's also a question and answer feature located at the bottom of your screen, and we'll use that to drive the questions in the Q&A session at the end of Dr. Taubman's presentation. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Taubman, CEO of the University of Rochester Medical Center and the Dean of the School of Medicine and Dentistry. Following Dr. Taubman's presentation, I'll be back to share with you and moderate the question session. Dr. Taubman?
Thank you very much, Jill, and welcome everybody. It's really a pleasure to spend some time with you and talk about the School of Medicine. I really do wish it was in person, and I actually do see light at the end of the tunnel that we'll be doing these things, not virtually, but together in Rochester at some point sooner than later. What I do want to do today is not talk about 2 years of pandemic, but really talk about what's going on with the School of Medicine, because really we really are in a very exciting point in the history of the school, and I hope to give you a flavor of where we've been going despite the challenges of the last 2 years. So I'm going to start clinically, and at this point, we obviously have an audience that has a broad range of years from the University of Rochester. So those of you who recently graduated, this won't be that unusual, but we've now, like most of our peers, become a pretty large healthcare system where we now take care of roughly 700,000 patients in Western New York. What you can see on this map is a variety of things. What has the UR insignia are 6 hospitals that are affiliates, meaning we own them, including 3 hospitals in the Southern Tier and F.F. Thompson in Canandaigua. And they form the bulk of our network. We recently have been overseeing the management of Finger Lakes Health, which runs Geneva General in Geneva and Soldiers and Sailors in Penn Yan. And we are in the very end of our plan to acquire them, waiting for government approval, but they will then become the 7th and 8th hospitals in our system. We also have a management contract to help Arnott Health in Elmira. And we have important relationships with systems in Syracuse, such as St. Joe's, and even the Bassett Health System in Cooperstown, which oversees about 200,000 lives. And we actually have a satellite of our nursing school there to help develop nurses for the region. So overall, we are about a $5 billion system. It's the 6th largest in New York, and it's a pretty large system. And our goal there is really twofold. One is to have the scale that allows us to provide any kind of high-end specialty in the region, so you never have to leave Rochester to get the state-of-the-art care, but also to provide a high-quality level of care throughout the regions, because 98% of your care is going to be local, and we want to make sure that that care is of the kind of quality which we think is unrivaled. We have developed an accountable care network, which includes both the employed physicians of the University of Rochester, which is our faculty group, which has roughly 1,600 docs, and 700 docs from the community. It allows us to work together, both to create the same quality of care, to negotiate with third-party payers, and really to provide a health system. This represents roughly 55% of all the physicians in Western New York. Roughly 3/4 of them are specialists, which reflect our role as a quaternary and tertiary academic center, and about a quarter are primary care physicians, both adult and pediatrics. I just showed you a picture of that map so you can get a sense of where all of the offices are for our medical faculty group and for the Accountable Care Network, Accountable Health Partners. What's important to appreciate is that not only does this create a network of primary care physicians, but what we're also trying to do is create a network of specialty services. And the most important of these, as an example, is what we have done with our Wilmot Cancer Institute. A little bit later, I'll talk about our goal for NCI designation. But over the last 10 years, the Wilmot has grown into a very large cancer institute that has 13 regional care locations throughout Western and upstate New York. And we now roughly have about 15% of the market in upstate New York. Upstate defined like I do as a Brooklyn boy of anything that is north or west of Westchester. This represents about, this 15% represents about double Roswell Park. So we've grown enormously. To put it in even better perspective, we are now one of the top 25 largest cancer institutes in the country. Our new patient volume is roughly 5,000 a year, and that exceeds both UCLA and USC. We also have a collaboration with the Bassett Healthcare System, which further enhances our role as the primary resource for high-end cancer treatment outside of New York City. It's not only in terms of treatment, but it's also in terms of clinical trials. You can see here, this is a map of where our clinical trials are. And to a large extent, that map is the same map as I just showed you. So that what we've not only been able to do is not only extend and create a network that provides high quality cancer care throughout the region, but also allows those people to be involved throughout the region in our clinical trials. We have two major projects that I think it's worth talking about. They actually represent the two largest projects in the history of the medical center and in the university. One is the development of an orthopedics campus. Our orthopedics program, which I think probably most of you know, is among the top in the country, both in terms of research program, which is usually in the top 5 or 10 in the country in terms of funding, in terms of clinical orthopedics. That has continued to grow and really has outstripped its resources. So we are building a new orthopedics campus in Marketplace Mall. As many of you may know, Marketplace Mall opened up way before I got to Rochester and really was the flagship and a sense of pride in terms of malls in the Rochester area. Like most areas in the United States, malls are starting to run into difficulty. In this case, both Macy's and Sears went closed. J.C. Penney's is still there, but it's only a matter of time. And we felt that this was an ideal place, both because of its location, near highways, not too far from the main campus of the university, and very accessible by public transportation to build an orthopedic center. This is a 350,000 square foot building, which will provide us with a really nearly 3 times the size that we currently have in our orthopedics building in Clinton Crossing. We'll have 140 orthopedics exam rooms, but it'll also allow us to move all of our operating rooms in orthopedics to this location. It has the capacity for 14. We're going to start with 8, but this will allow us to move all of the orthopedic surgery that's outpatient, and that represents 82% of all of our orthopedic surgery, away from our ambulatory surgical center to the orthopedic center to create a cohesive campus that will include our sports medicine program. The ORs will free up ambulatory surgical center for other non-orthopedic surgery, and it will provide about 110,000 square feet of space at Clinton Crossings, which we'll use to enhance our neuromedicine programs. The patient care and administrative offices will be ready in September. The surgical center will open in October, and the final tower, which will contain all the offices, will open in the following year in September. So this is well on its way, and I hope if you get a chance to visit Rochester, that you will see this site. We envision this as a site that will really be a site for ambulatory services. So not just orthopedics, but as we grow, we will be moving in this site. And very recently, there was a very nice article in the Wall Street Journal about this is an example of how the healthcare systems are essentially taking over malls and rejuvenating them. They specifically focused on the orthopedics building. We are also in the process of starting our work on our new hospital. And this really will be not only a new emergency department, but a hospital building. It's be a 600,000 square foot building, will cost about $600 million. And what this will do is allow us to triple the size of our emergency room and make it modular. So there'll be specific modules for drug detoxification, distinct zones for adults and children's for the psych ED. Our emergency department was built for 50,000 people, but we're now seeing 120. So we're incredibly crowded. There'll be all private rooms, double emergency psychiatry, and attached to this will be a 9-story addition, which will allow us to backfill the current Strong Memorial Hospital with all private rooms. So the goal of this at the end will be to have 100% private rooms. We'll provide expansion for an additional 100 or so private beds. For the last 5 years, we've been running at over 100% capacity, more typically at about 105% for medical and surgical. So this will help to handle that. And this ED tower will be attached to the current emergency department. So if one has one's back to Mount Holmes Cemetery and looks at the emergency department, the new tower and ED will be on its right in what used to be called the staff house. And right now, what we are doing is a number of enabling projects, which will include changing the loading docks, changing the utilities, ultimately raising the staff house, but will allow us to expand to a huge ED tower that will be modern And as one of our more clinically astute trustees said, will provide a resource that's equivalent to the quality of our faculty and staff. So in a nutshell, that's what our clinical enterprise looks like and will look like. We're thrilled that all of these projects have been moving forward despite the challenges with COVID. On the educational front, I just want to highlight what we look like. We remain a relatively small undergraduate medical school, accepting roughly 105 students a year, 8 of whom are MD, PhD students. The graduate program is actually larger. It has over 500 students, including 340 PhD students in 12 different areas. And in addition, we take about 70 PhD students a year. And in addition, we have about 150 master's students. We also have 140 postdoctoral scholars, a number of them coming from our graduates. Our graduate medical education program has grown into one of the largest in the country. We have 814 residents and fellows in over 84 different areas. Our largest educational program for the medical center is actually the School of Nursing, which has doubled in size in the last 6 years, in part reflecting the increasing need for nursing. There is a huge nursing shortage in the country, actually estimated about 10 times the size of the physician shortage. So our nursing school has been growing rapidly and trying to provide nurses for the region, and it's just a superb school. Our dental program in the Eastman Institute has roughly 140 people. They are both residents and people getting masters and a few PhDs. They do not have an undergraduate dental school, but we are planning in our new strategic plan for a small undergraduate dental school that would provide a DDS PhD, so be specifically geared to people wanting a dual degree, similar to what Harvard does. And we have over 1,800 full-size faculty. So that's what our sort of educational programs look like. One of the things that's new this year was we just developed a new department of health, humanities, and bioethics. In the past, there was a bioethics program that was housed in medicine, and there was a program of medical humanities, which was a freestanding division under the School of Medicine. But we felt that at this point, this deserves to be a department unto itself, home. It really, we sort of envision this as the home of the biopsychosocial model, but also it's a response to the growing need for humanities and bioethics expertise across the enterprise. The two divisions also include the Shivey Center for Bioethics. And really, this will be one of only 8 medical centers with a Department of Health, Humanities, and Bioethics. But we believe that that is consistent with our roots in the biopsychosocial model. And we see this department playing a role throughout the university, but particularly enhancing our efforts in diversity and equity, but in our efforts to expand the biopsychosocial model throughout the university. This year, we've had some very important recruits. We've been recruiting a lot. I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. Ruth O'Regan, our new chair of medicine, recruited Patricia Rivera to be chief of pulmonary medicine. She is an expert in lung cancer. And Paul Bohannon, recently as the chief of infectious disease, he is an expertise in HIV and its particularly the global effects of HIV. He focuses on the cryptococcal meningitis as a result of HIV, has a major collaboration in Uganda, spends about 6 months a year in Uganda and 6 months in the US. He will develop those programs now at the university, really providing opportunities for our medical students, residents, and staff to spend time in Uganda. Nathan Smith, recently recruited by our Department of Neuroscience, also to be the Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion. Susana Marcos, the Director of the Center for Visual Sciences. She was recruited from Spain, and her labs will be at the medical center. Karen Wilson, who's now the Chief Research Officer at the Golisano Children's Hospital. And so this has been quite a year in terms of recruitments. In terms of the medical school, this gives you a sort of a snapshot on what the medical school looks like. We get close to 6,000 applications. 11% of all people who apply to U.S. medical schools in 2021 applied to the University of Rochester. We are one of the most competitive. Over the last 5 years, we've had about a 5% acceptance rate. This year at 5.8%. You can see the GPA and NCATs. Our entering class includes about 25% underrepresented. That's almost exclusively Black and Latinx. It is 56% female. You can see the average age is about 24, and roughly 30% are New York State residents. One of the things that has been remarkable in the last couple of years has been a major increase in the number of applications to our PhD programs. And I believe that this is a testament in some way to the quality of our faculty and the enhanced national reputation of our PhD faculty. You can see this year we accepted roughly 66. Again, about 56% female, 23% from underrepresented groups, and I think that's a huge change. Over the 4 years ago, we were at 5%. There have been substantial efforts, particularly to increase our underrepresented group, and which really is bearing fruit. So this is a significant change, and hopefully it will continue to grow, and we'll continue to increase our prestige as a PhD program. This year we had a sensational match for our medical students going to residency. Roughly 80% match to one of their top 3 choices. About 21 remaining in Rochester, so it's about 25%, which is typical, and about a third that stay in New York State. Something interesting is that the most popular were internal medicine and family medicine at 10, and right below that was pediatrics and emergency medicine. So we continue to see a shift away from internal medicine. The only people now who apply for internal medicine are applying for fellowships. Those are 1 fellowships. If people want to do primary practice, they either do family medicine or meds peds. And so this continues to be a shift. I think I wouldn't be surprised if next year our most popular is family medicine. In terms of our residency programs, this just gives you a snapshot of what happens. Among our residents, roughly 50% go into fellowships. And if we look at all of our graduates, which are residents and fellows, roughly half go into practice. And those that go into practice, unusually about almost 60% stay in state. And of those, a substantial part stay in upstate New York. So, you know, it's an interesting split between people going into fellowships and into academic medicine, about half, and then the other half going into clinical practice, but particularly staying in the region. And really represents sort of our dual role of trying to make sure that we have the appropriate workforce for the region, but we continue to generate the next group of leaders in academic medicine and research. In terms of research, when we started our strategic plan, we tried to move away from departmental-based research into multi-departmental, multidisciplinary programs of excellence. You could see those programs listed here, of which, you know, our goal was really to enhance the national and international reputation of some of those programs. And particularly what has really fallen out over the last 4 or 5 years are our programs in cancer, neuromedicine, immunobiology, RNA biology, and musculoskeletal disease. But going forward, we just established a new aging institute and a new environmental medicine institute and a new institute for healthcare disparities, and they will be a focus, increasing focus. You can see we have about $250 million in research, roughly 60% from the NIH. We have 1,800 grants in total. The majority of those are clinical trials, but as you can see, we have 400 NIH grants and roughly 270 faculty or principal investigators on NIH grants and contracts. All told, we have 670 faculty or on grants. So that represents about 40% of all our faculty are involved in research on grants. And as you can see, we invest about $140 million from the medical center to support the research. What I'm going to highlight now for the next couple of minutes is some of those programs of excellence. When we started our strategic plan, all of these programs developed their own strategic plans. You can see the Wilmot Cancer Center has 13 departments, 95 faculty members, and this strategic plan both involved the growth of the clinical enterprise, and I showed you those maps before. We now have 13 centers, but also the research enterprise. We've invested about $100 million into this effort, including $50 million endowment, which then spins off roughly $2.75 million a year, which the Cancer Center is using to develop the program. Over the last 5 years, they've recruited 23 people. Their annual grant funding has now doubled up to $32 million. And what you can see, and you'll keep seeing these slides for about 4 or 5, are some of the high points. In green are major developments. In blue are major recruitments which include, in this case, Bruce O'Regan, who's the chair of medicine, who's an expert in triple-negative breast cancer, but also some highlights. So during this time, we have had a 70% increase in clinical trials. And most importantly, the goal of the aim of this Wilmot Cancer Strategic Plan was to develop designation as a comprehensive care center by the NCI. This is something we had in 1996, but up until 1996, but lost it. And our goal was to get it back. We submitted our grant in September. We recently had the site visit. It was a virtual site visit. It went very well. And we are very optimistic that we will regain our status as a comprehensive cancer center. But more importantly, in the process of doing it, we've really developed into a major player in cancer in many, many areas. We really are one of the world's leaders in RNA biology. This program is led by Lynn McQuat, who is one of our most distinguished scientists. You can see that this program over the last 5 years has recruited 8 additional scientists, produced 400 publications, and now has doubled its grant funding. Perhaps most significantly, Lynn has won almost every award leading up to the Nobel Prize, including last year, the Warren Alpert Foundation Prize and the Wolf Prize. About 35% of each of those winners win the Nobel. We're just waiting, but you can see that it really has allowed us to recruit substantially in RNA biology. And the program now has 9 departments and 23 faculty members. I mentioned musculoskeletal program. That program involves 13 departments and roughly 50 faculty members. Our annual grant funding now exceeds $22 million. And among the highlights have been the development of 3 major center grants, the P350s and the P30s and P50s, and a training grant in musculoskeletal science. Probably our second largest program is the Del Monte Neuroscience program. That involves 16 departments and 80 faculty members. Not only have we invested about 16 million, but like the Cancer Center, we have another 50 million that we've put in endowment from clinical reserves that have been used to grow this program, which includes 8 primary recruitments to the Department of Neuroscience and another 22 co-recruitments, including co-recruitments with the River Campus. We now have $54 million in grant funding, and really not only we increased our imaging, most recently with a 9.4 Tesla magnet, but we were able to garner 2 of the most important grants available. One was becoming an intellectual developmental and disabilities research center. This is an NIH-supported research center. There are only 14 in the country, and it is unusual to get a new center. We became the first one in 13 years, first new center in 13 years, and the first center in 2 decades to get the award on its first application. In order to do this, we had to bump a center, which was Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. And this IDD Research Center, like getting NCI designation, was not only the goal, but it provides us with opportunities to get funding that we otherwise wouldn't. A year ago, we got this funding to study COVID in patients with an intellectual developmental research center. We've also been involved in the ABCD trial, which is sort of similar to the Framingham study. It images young people and then follows them to see if we can identify imaging patterns that will predict subsequent neurological disease and cognitive disorders. And lastly, our infection and immunology program, again with 8 departments and 53 faculty members. We've had 11 recruitments. And what you see here is that we really became a major site for many of the COVID trials. We learned from Google that our website for research in COVID was one of the top 5 hits in the country. And throughout this epidemic, because of that, Google has been using us as one of their sources to answer questions about COVID research. But this, again, in the green, gives you some sense of what has gone on. So those are sort of highlight some of our 5 top research programs. As I mentioned, there are 10 other clinical and research-based programs of excellence, and they are available to look at some of this on our website. Another major part of our strategic plan was to develop clinical trials. This included developing an Office of Clinical Research with a director, senior associate dean, who is both the head of our Clinical Translational Science Institute, but also the head of clinical research. I'm not going to go through all of this slide, but this gives you some idea of the projects that are involved in trying to really make us one of the major players in the country in clinical trials. This included a $12 million clinical trial management system, which allowed us to enhance our cancer trials by over 70%. And one of the things that when we talked to the NCI that shocked them was that they are doing virtual site visits on a variety of NCI cancer centers. And during the COVID years, we were the only ones that had an increase in clinical trials, not a decrease. But you can see this includes new training programs in clinical trials, new recruitment programs, and we're very proud of this. You can see among the things that it has done is it's also increased revenues coming out of the clinical trials. And it's allowed us not only to increase our trials, but to actually sunset trials that aren't working and focus on the trials that really make the most sense and can enroll the most people. I mentioned before that we invest about $140 million in our research program. That's roughly 60 cents on the dollar. That's not unusual. About 8 years ago, the AAMC did a study of research-intensive medical schools and found the average was about 53 cents on the dollar. It's grown a little bit since that time. And you can see here, this gives you some progression of our total research funding over the last 6 years and about how much we invest each year to support that. What does this 60 cents go to? It's pretty similar in most institutions. It goes to facilities administration, faculty salaries, because particularly with NIH pay lines being as low as they are, it's really hard to ask faculty to support more than 50%. Recruitment costs, including the recruitment of our chairs, retention costs, supporting the core facilities, supporting the vivarium, fully supporting the graduate program, so for tuitions and stipends, and enhancing departmental budgets. What makes us a little unusual is that we are, compared to our peers, relatively under-endowed. We're really endowed. We're at the very bottom of endowment in those 40 or so research-intensive programs. So you can see roughly 36 million a year comes through our endowment, which a little bit come about 8 million or so from gifts. Our royalties, which used to be about 17, 18 million a year when we had the vaccines, they have sunset and it's pretty low, and that's not atypical of other academic centers where royalties go up and down. So we've increasingly transferred money from the clinical enterprise. We are, one of the things that we have done is we now have a single budget. We do not really have a medical school, a faculty group, a hospital budget. We're an integrated medical center. We have a single medical center budget. And the support of the research and the educational mission now really becomes a fundamental part of the medical center budget, not a negotiation between the hospital and the medical school and the faculty group, but rather it's something that as an integrated budget, we decide on for the medical center. But we, unlike our peers, the largest percentage of any medical school in the medical center in the country in supporting the research and academic exercises through the clinical enterprises. One of the things we were concerned about was we and others began to look a little bit top heavy. Normally you have more assistant professors and associates and the fewest professors, but with the flattening of the NIH budget and the market crash in 2008, most institutions put their money to support the people who were there, did less recruiting. And so we saw an inverse pyramid. What you see here in the blue line, which is very important to us, is we really try to more and more recruit new assistant professors. And you see now that that's beginning to bear fruit, where we have now more assistant professors and associate professors. And we are hoping over time that we really will get the correct pyramid with more assistant professors. This also gives us the opportunity to really make a dent in diversity and issues with gender equity, which are being corrected. One of the things I think that we are happy about is that you've seen the growth of our research enterprise, despite the fact that we're recruiting so many assistant professors. And this not only represents the quality of the people we are recruiting, because a lot of them don't have funding yet and are on startup packages, but that the people who are already been recruited, who are more senior assistant professors or associate professors, have very, very high levels of funding, roughly $560,000 per research faculty, roughly $325,000 of NIH funding. And these, are quite good. They put us in the top echelon in the country. So I think we're going well with our research, and I am looking forward to more. Our continued growth and continued increase in the prestige of our programs. And last but not least, I want to spend a little time on our Equity and Anti-Racism Action Plan. This is something we developed in fiscal year 2020 and to start in 2021. It's a very broad plan. You can see this. We have a website that really identifies this. It has 72 actions, is very metric driven, but is designed to really make every person feel safe. For those who know Rochester well, we want to be considered the Wegmans of academic medical center, the place that everybody wants to be: a student, a faculty, a staff, a learner. And so this program is really try to enhance the culture so that everybody is uplifted. It is also designed to enhance diversity, really attack anti-racism at its root. To do this, we have really developed a vigorous Office of Equity and Diversity under Adrian Morgan's leadership. And I will tell you that this organization chart, and I don't want to go through it, is going to actually grow substantially over the next couple of years, but it does give you some sense of the efforts, the breadth of efforts that we're making in this area. This includes a new program, a new Office of Health Equity Research. Right now, we are in the process of a national search looking for candidates to lead this office. We also have an Equity Provider Task Force, which is more dealing with clinical healthcare disparities in the community and is working together with the community. And what you see here is that these two are headed by a Health Equity Steering Committee, which works directly with 40 different community agencies within Rochester to make sure that we are on sync with our community in terms of providing services and developing the research programs that will tackle health disparities. Part of this is a real effort to recruit in the area, both faculty and residents, and as you saw, graduate students, undergraduate students, staff. We now have a centralized recruiting function that is designed to source diverse candidates. Every search now has a committee that goes through unconscious bias training. We have developed a recruitment toolkit for best practices. And we've also started to do pilots in cluster hiring, meaning hiring 3 people in one area as a way of enhancing the attractiveness, particularly to underrepresented groups who otherwise might see themselves as not being represented in the department. So this is an ongoing effort. And lastly, I mentioned before, we have an integrated budget. You're no longer seeing a school budget or a hospital budget. As you can see, we've continued to grow yearly. We're now in fiscal year 23, we will be a $5 billion operation. In general, we run around at 60 to about a $90 million margin. You can see in fiscal year 20, when COVID hit, that went down. Fiscal year 21, it was unusually high because of a lot of CARE Act funding and a lot of reductions that we made in thinking that things were going to be particularly bad. A lot of that money has been expended in the current year, but you see we remain with a significant margin, which really allows us to move forward in our academic missions and to continue to grow as a clinical enterprise. So I will stop there and entertain questions. I hope this gives you a sense of where we are in all of our missions, clinically, educationally, research-wise, and culturally, in our attempts to really be a leader in the region. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll send it back to Jill.
Excellent, excellent. I just remind folks to put questions in the chat box, and thank you, Dr. Talman, for an exceptional update on the university. Maybe what I'll do is use your last topic as a springboard. Throughout the presentation, you really highlighted a number of efforts that the school has made over the last several years in heightening diversity and inclusion programs. That is very evident through the increased recruitment within the PhD programs. I applaud the university's recruitment of Nathan Smith, not only because he's being recruited into the Dean role for Diversity and Inclusion and Research, but also because he's a fellow alumni in the PhD program in Neuroscience. And that kind of leads into the first question I have. It's about a lot of efforts have been focused on recruitment and programs. What are some of the things that the university is doing now that you actually are seeing this increase in recruitment of students and faculty of diverse backgrounds to actually retain them, whether it's retaining students into postdoc or faculty positions or residency programs, or retaining faculty of diverse backgrounds within the university?
Yeah, I think that's a multi-part question. I think that, in terms of retention, one of the things that we are trying to do better than we had before is exactly what you say. Identify people at an early stage and shepherd them through the system. And I think that, for many people, particularly in my generation, this sort of goes a little counter to what academic centers tended to do, where we thought, all right, you send your best outside because, number one, you want them to show off to the rest of the world, and how best to do that, but send your best out, and you wanted them to get other experiences. But I think, given the situation, one of the things we're really working on is identifying, great medical students and saying, let's keep them for a residency and get them onto faculty. One of the things we've now we'll be initiating is our own K99, where we identify good graduate students and say, all right, we're going to give you a 5-year program when you graduate, the first 3 years, really as a postdoc. And if things go well, then you become part of our faculty. I think one of the reasons for integrating our office, and so Adrian is the VP for Equity and Inclusion, the whole medical center, is so we have a broad view and can really identify people who we want to sort of shepherd onto the program into faculty. I think, I think retaining faculty, two things. One, we have to do what we're doing in trying to create a culture where they enjoy being here and they are not experiencing microaggressions or other things that will make them leave. Trying to do a lot more mentoring and a lot of programs that we're going to be developing for faculty development. The reason you tend to lose faculty is usually not salary, but they can't grow in the institution. So it's a matter of mentoring, making sure they can grow in the institution, and doing cluster hiring. John Fox in Neuroscience has recruited 5 BIPOC this year. That creates a critical mass that makes it more desirable, I think, for people not only to come here, but to stay. We understand, though, that retention is always difficult because people who do well become targets for other people. So it's making sure that we know that they can develop.
And I think too, one of the questions that came into the chat was about empowering and tutoring programs for underserved undergraduate students that are looking to go to medical school and graduate school. And actually, that was my first interaction with Adrienne Morgan, was her running programs for underserved students within the Rochester community to get them extra tutoring and support. And so, just ensuring that there's opportunities for faculty, staff, students to pay it forward and help and contribute to those. So one of the questions was around sort of the increased service that you're seeing from the faculty and the staff and the students in participating in DEI efforts. Are those things counting towards the service attributes of a faculty member when they're looking at tenure and sort of promotion?
Yes. One of the things we have done a number of years ago was change our promotion criteria. And there were a lot of reasons to do this. It wasn't specifically for issues related to DEI, but we wanted to make sure that our promotion criteria were more holistic, but also to recognize institutional roles. And one of the things that drove this was people in biostatistics who don't get their own grants but are in 10 different people's grants, or people who at one point were doing transgenic cores, making animals that were critical for everybody's research, but they didn't have their own. And we realized we needed an institutional track which recognizes and promotes people for what they're doing that is broader. And certainly DEI falls into that, where somebody like an Adrienne Morgan or who has a major role in moving this forward could be promoted based on the institutional. So this is it's a very important issue. And it's not just for DEI. You have to make sure your promotion criteria reflect what you're trying to achieve as an institution, and not simply say it's based on getting grants.
Yeah. And so I guess in the way of the last question, in interest of time, you highlighted a lot of wonderful things that the school is doing. Can you comment maybe on some of the projects, the inter-school projects within the universities, things that the medical school is doing in collaborations with other parts of the university, possibly with Simon or Warner School or some of the other programs across the university?
Sure. And I think, I think we're in an environment right now where the ability to work with other parts of the university has really been enhanced. Uh, I think we're far less isolated than we might have been even 19 years ago when I started. Uh, Obviously, the neuroscience has been a big issue. Visual science, uh, when a lot of the labs in the Center for Visual Science are actually at the medical center, our biomedical engineering program. So these are in the science area, and probably not surprising. A couple of years ago, we started developing a music medicine program, the Eastman School of Music. That has really grown. It has 4 different wings, which includes music therapy, uh, research, a clinical area for helping people with music-related injuries, both instrumentalists and the voice. Um, we are, we are now speaking. We have a great relationship with the new dean of the Simon School. Uh, One of the things that we are trying to do is develop more and more programs for our medical students that allow them to get masters in medical management, masters in business administration. I think this can become more and more important. One of the challenges that we are going to have is that some of our peers can get free education. We just don't have the resources. We don't have the endowment to do this. So one of the questions we've asked is, if we can't necessarily compete on tuition, can we create value added? And so we're starting to talk to Simon. Do we go to a more like a 3-year curriculum like NYU and Duke and Yale have done, and provide options for our medical students in the Simon School, in the Warner School? So I think a big thing that you're going to see in the next 5 years is far more integration of the medical center academically with the units in the River campus. And I think it's going to be very exciting.
Excellent. Well, I think in the interest of time, we should probably close out tonight's session, since I'm sure folks want to grab dinner with their families. But thank you, Dr. Taubman, and thank you to everybody for joining us. Just a few quick reminders. As all of you probably know, the Alumni Council hosts and organizes annual School of Medicine and Dentistry Awards for alumni in a number of key areas. The nominations for those are currently live. And we'll drop the link, the nomination link into the chat. I highly encourage you guys to nominate your classmates, your peers, folks from the university for these awards that will be due at the end of March. And then also, if you're not a member of the Melior Collective, I highly encourage you guys all to become members of the collective. For those of you who are not familiar with it, this is the university's online networking platform that's exclusive for University of Rochester alumni and students. And there's an opportunity through the Melior Collective to mentor students, to join your peers, join alumni for similar specialties, topic areas, and special interest groups specific to the School of Medicine and Dentistry. We'll also drop the link for the Melior Collective into the chat this evening. And again, I just want to close by thanking you guys all for joining us, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening, and hopefully we will see you at future events. Thank you.